I was joking about this last night on the Niners postgame show we do at the station or on their Instagram live. I was like, if the Cowboys went into Philadelphia tomorrow, I might make the Cowboys a 1.5, 2-point favorite at Philadelphia.
I was listening to Philly Sports Talk, and the way they're talking about it, they don't really expect themselves to win next week either, because they are so down on their own secondary after that game that they don't believe that they have any chance in hell of stopping CeeDee Lamb.
If you took the three great teams in the NFC and took the 6 units, offense and defense, the worst of the 6 is Eagles defense with a smoking gun. I mean, between the Niners, Cowboys, and Eagles, the worst unit is the Eagles defense.
Well, we learned that their linebackers just can't keep up whatsoever. They just don't have a single linebacker amongst a lot of them.
Oh, but guess who just signed with them? Shaq Leonard.
Shaq Leonard. Yeah, but I was actually reading some stuff from the Colts because I'm like, damn, why would they get rid of Shaq Leonard? Wasn't he such a staple for their team? And apparently just there's a lot of he's washed talk because he was struggling to see the field amongst their linebacking group they have there.
Yeah, there's a reason he was available, but he's going to make it better for the Eagles because the Eagles, damn, who would have thought Edmonds and who's the guy on the Cardinals? Like Kaiser, who would have thought Kaiser White and Edmonds would leave and the entire defense would fall apart? And obviously Hargrave left, but they kind of got Jalen Carter, so that made it hurt a little bit less. But like, who would have thought those guys would leave and the whole defense would fall apart?
For what it's worth, I mean, Jonathan Gannon also left. I mean, I know a lot of Eagles fans were roasting him for the Super Bowl, but they did have a change at coordinator.
Yeah, that's fair. Man, Patrick Mahomes swiped their soul, man. That second half of the Super Bowl just swiped their soul. He played the perfect half and swiped the soul of that.
Well, it definitely exposed them because the Chiefs, what they did was just a ton of motion. And obviously you look at what the Niners were able to do, just gain them so off platform yesterday. Hassan Reddick, people were joking about him being in like a spin cycle whenever that play to Deebo, right? Where it was that double reverse and just you see Hassan Reddick just turn and fall down, like seeing Deebo run into the end zone. That was embarrassing. And hey, shout out to Deebo for living up to his trash talk. I mean, damn, that's a statement and a half.
Yeah, it's one thing you posted that he called their corner trash, showed up in black Air Force Ones and dropped 130 yards and 3 tutties on them.
That's what you do if you're going to talk trash, right? Like that
badass.
Michael Jordan energy of I'm going to talk shit, but I'm also going to back that shit up. Yeah, that was legendary.
This is his best game of the year. I know this because he's on my fantasy team.
Dare I say, it might be his best game as a Niner ever. Like he's had some impressive ass games as a Niner. Don't get me wrong, but given the offseason talk, given every single podcast getting asked about the Eagles time after time after time, it would have been very easy for him to show up and post a 4 for 30 stat line. No, he was not good having any of that. The Niners made a point. You're going to be a big part of this game plan. And he showed up. So that was legendary by Deebo Samuel. It was a great game. Like it was signature game for everyone on the Niners. It was a statement game. We talked about in another video what it meant for Brock Purdy, him being in the MVP conversation. Christian McCaffrey coming out had a big game. And, for Kyle Shanahan, this had to feel good because, he scripted up some plays in the last year's NFC Championship game, had to just throw out his entire script as soon as Brock Purdy got hurt, as soon as Josh Johnson got hurt. Just the fact that he got to actually use his playbook, get some stuff off his chest. It felt good for me as a fan, like as an unbiased spectator. What'd you think watching that one?
It was amazing, dude. So we'll talk about the football side because there's another thing that I want to spend like an hour talking about that is kind of football-y related. It involves Dom DeSandro, but from the football standpoint, so the Philadelphia Eagles were in the first quarter, they had 120 something yards of offense compared to -6 for the 49ers. Yeah. The time of possession was like Niners 2 minutes, 1 second, Eagles 12 minutes and 59 seconds. And the Eagles had the ball to start the second quarter. So like the Eagles had a few extra, moments in time of possession in there. So like when Philadelphia does that to start the game, and yes, it's 6-0, and yes, it's into the second quarter, but Philadelphia does that, and the Niners, they get their third possession early in the second quarter. And what's crazy is that they turn the ball over so quick that they're still on the scripted plays by Kyle Shanahan. And when the scripted plays kind of kick off, it's kind of crazy to think about how they just march right down the field. On the next drive, they had a Kittle route that was like kind of a wheel route, but not a wheel route. He just cuts up the sideline. It goes for 33 yards, and just the Eagles like forgot to cover George Kittle in their zone, and they just found a soft spot to get first and goal. Like it was incredible to watch from that point forward, that Niner offense just pick apart the Eagles defense in the same way that Dak did at the end of the game a few weeks ago. I know they got down by like 21, so it was kind of a futile effort, but like Dak charging back at Philadelphia a couple weeks ago, the way that Kansas City did in the Super Bowl. We talked a second ago about how many people fell apart from the Eagles defense, but like Kansas City played a perfect half. I keep citing the stat. Ed Warner brought it up at the time. Kansas City in that second half of that Super Bowl had 0 penalties, 0 turnovers, 0 punts, 0 sacks allowed. The only incompletion was a throwaway. They pitched a perfect half of football against that Eagles defense. And you mentioned motion. That's kind of been the name of the game for teams to counter the Eagles. It's why you would make the argument for the Cowboys using more motion in their offense. The Cowboys are not at the top of the league in using motion. Meanwhile, Kansas City is 4th in the league in motion, and the Niners are 2nd, only behind Mike McDaniel, who comes from the same motion-based offense from Kyle Shanahan. I mean, some people think of him as the disciple of that. So, like, yeah, motion-based offense and picking apart the middle of the field for the Eagles has absolutely been the name of the game. And, I mean, Deebo Samuel just outran dudes. Like, it was crazy to watch Deebo Samuel outrunning dudes in that Eagles secondary.
It's funny with Deebo sometimes because I watch that guy, and the reason he was available in the second round, because I think if you did a redraft, Deebo Samuel would have been a first round pick, right?
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Yeah. The reason he fell to the second round is because he wasn't like the fastest guy, but when you watch him play, his breakaway speed in games is amongst the upper echelon of like the National Football League. Like he just has such a way about hitting that accelerator at the right time. And whenever he sees a hole, he's gone. And it's one of his shining characteristics as a player among his toughness. And I think the Niners, what they really did was just that toughness, because you talk about the like plays to Kittle. Kittle had a play in there where he ran over like 3 guys too. Like he could have avoided contact, but he said, you know what? I'm going to drive this Eagles defender back 10 yards with me. Oh yeah. And Jawan Jennings, his touchdown, right? Whenever he just straight up olayed the guy was impressive. But it even goes to the quarterback, because there was a run by Brock Purdy in that game where he shook off 2 Eagles defenders on his way to at least gain a positive net play out of play that should have essentially been nothing. The Niners just straight up out physicaled them. And that's why I think the Niners, even if they don't get the 1 seed, which it would suck if they didn't get the 1 seed. Yeah, they would have to go back to the elements, potentially go back to Philadelphia, outdoor stadiums, all that stuff, which traditionally California teams don't do well. But the Niners are built in such a way that they transcend that. Go back to the Green Bay Packers game at Lambeau a couple years ago, 2021 playoffs, where they managed to win on that walk-off field goal. They were more equipped for the elements than the Packers were. That's what this Niners team shows time after time after time again. And they're on a different level right now than every other team in the league. And I try not to gloat. I try not to get too high on it, because obviously I recognize that I have a bias when talking about the Niners, but this is just a damn good football team. Every level of this team, maybe except the offensive line, but the offensive line did just enough. Clearly, Kyle Shanahan has found a way to hide the offensive line, to bury them a little bit, because you didn't see Brock Purdy touched but 2 times in that game. 2 sacks to Brock Purdy. Like, given what the Eagles pass rush is, the fact that they were able to protect Purdy to that extent says a lot about some of the stuff that they're dialing up to make sure that the offensive line is almost a non-factor. And the fact that they were just able to dominate them too, rushing to the left side, tells you they know where their strengths are and they know where their weaknesses are, and they know how to hide their weaknesses, which I think is a thing that good coaching does. It hides your weaknesses and it amplifies your strengths.
I'm going to throw out a stat that is pretty incredible, but we don't think about all that much. In regular season games in which both Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey play for the San Francisco 49ers, the 49ers are 19-0. 19-0. This team is incredible with the offensive line protection that they have, rebuilding the offense. You know, I've said this before, and it's good to reiterate again, especially after a game where they score 6 touchdowns on 6 consecutive possessions and have essentially 3-4 different players scoring touchdowns at the end of that game with Juwan Jennings and Christian McCaffrey and Ayuk and Deebo's 3 touchdowns. Like, we used to think Shanahan just brought in rando running backs and it transformed their offense. No, this is the Christian McCaffrey run-based offense with Trent Williams protecting Brock Purdy's blind side and having Aaron Banks and just a decent offensive line around the greatest offensive lineman maybe in NFL history. It has transformed what the 49ers do on offense, gives so much time. The offense incorporates motion. They get 10 points on all the scripted plays that Shanahan runs basically every week. Yeah. And against subpar defenses, 30 points is a given whenever the 49ers play and have Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey on their team.
And talking about the blocking as well, I just also got to give such a shout out to Kyle Juszczyk and George Kittle. Some of those blocks, like nerding out about like football, nerding out about like blocking is not sexy. It's not something that people typically do. But like you look at some of the biggest plays the Niners did, and you just see George Kittle taking on 2-3 guys and every like other wide receiver just taking their job seriously and like blocking downfield. That's why just big chunk play after big chunk play. That's what I think they expose most about Philadelphia, that those like corners, they can't hold up like whenever they have a guy coming up after them to just take them out of the play, right? Take them out. I don't blame anyone from running away from when Trent Williams running at you. Remember the Jaguars player that just straight up ran away from him? I get it. Trent Williams is a scary man when he's coming after you. So yeah, I can't diminish anything that Trent Williams brings to this team. It's just obviously, we know besides him, you mentioned Aaron Banks. Aaron Banks is solid, but besides those two, like I don't really have a lot of faith of anyone else on the offensive line. But again, they bury them, they mask them, they bring in George Kittle, they tell George Kittle to stay in. And the great part about that is every now and then George Kittle could just dink people into thinking, oh, is he going to block? Is he going to block? No, he's just going to go out there and just give Brock Purdy an open player in the flat that's going to run for 20 yards. You know, that's just the great part about this offense. The versatility of each piece makes them extra tough to guard. I don't know what the hell Deebo's going to do when he's doing that orbit stuff in the background where he's just running around in circles. And then next thing you know, he's just running down the field for 20, 30 yards. Like that's when I felt they were the most deadly, when they were doing that orbit stuff.
It has the vibe of that Baltimore Ravens team from a few years ago, or even like Kansas City 2020 type stuff, where it's like you are hoping to limit them to field goals. Like if you can limit them to field goals, you have a chance, especially if you have a great offense. But they haven't made very many mistakes when Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey are in there. And Brock Purdy's playing at an MVP level, and that'll work in the 49ers' favor for the time going forward. I do want to focus in on the Eagles real quick, because the Eagles did do a couple things pretty well in the midst of getting tossed around like ragdolls in the second half on defense. When they were down 21-6, this was right after the Dom DeSandro fight on the sideline. They had a 3rd and 10 at like the 12-yard line, where the Niners blitzed 6 and Hurts was able to get the ball to A.J. Brown, and they picked up the first down, and they did 2 tush pushes, and they got in or brotherly shoves and got in the end zone. And that was something that was interesting because the Eagles had not really done that well. I mean, all teams this year had not done well against the Niner blitz package. I mean, when you're talking about a defense that can blitz Fred Warner or bring in a corner off the edge and rush at the passer like that, that is a game changer for the 49ers defense, in addition to all those guys they have on the defensive line.
I hear what you're saying there, but also at the same time, I hated the blitz call a little bit there, because it did remind me a little bit of Minnesota, where, of course, all out blitz, Jordan Addison takes one to the house. Like Steve Wilkes, at times, it feels like he's dialed up blitzes at the wrong time. And full admission, I thought that the Dre Greenlaw, Dom DeSantis thing too was just going to be the death note for the Niners. I thought that had shifted momentum. And again, that's why I ended up leaving more impressed with this game, because to have like such a emotional moment in a game usually can cripple a team, but it just made the Niners offense more resolute, coming back on the very next drive. And then you have the big Deebo Samuel touchdown play. And then the Niners defense, after that drive, it was over. It was all she wrote. Like they did not mess around. They managed to get Jalen Hurts to roll outside the pocket and just look uncomfortable all day. Like normally when a quarterback rolls outside the pocket like that, I'm thinking, shit, Someone's going to get open downfield. Someone's going to get open downfield. But no, it didn't happen. You know who's been stepping up, surprisingly? The Niners secondary. The Niners secondary has been stepping up. Charvarius Ward, he did a great job on DK Metcalf last week. He did just enough against AJ Brown, except early on. AJ Brown looked like pretty good early on. They were doing a lot of quick slants, and it was starting to become a problem. But in the red zone, shut that shit down. Charvarius Ward, 2 big pass breakups there. Lenoir, he's coming up big. He had a huge hit on DeAndre Swift late in the game. And then Ambry Thomas. This is a guy that was relegated to the bench. No one wanted to hear his name. People basically thought he was a bust. 3rd round pick out of Michigan. And Ambry Thomas is here, stepping up, making big plays. I think he had 1 career interception coming into the season. I know he's had multiple in the last few weeks, and he's had a few almost even more so in the last few weeks. Ambry Thomas has really been stepping up ever since they benched Oliver. And I think that is one of those things coming out of the bye week that doesn't get talked about enough, but deserves more credit, because it seems like Steve Wilkes, whatever coaching he's done for Ambry Thomas, I think it's worked. I think it's shown that Steve Wilkes has really got with his DB room, and he may have fixed Ambry Thomas. And if that's the case, even more dangerous. If the Niners are getting coverage sacks mixed with their defensive line, mixed with their front 7, forget about it.
There's some debate about the results from the corners for the 49ers in this game, because like there were times where Charvarius Ward and Ambry Thomas were getting cooked. They were getting cooked by those corners,
early on,
receivers.
Early on, certainly between the 20s, it was not looking great for them. But in the red zone, again, Charvarius Ward, Mooney Ward came up with some big pass breakups there. He was all over AJ Brown and legal coverage too. So you got to give him credit for that one. And then, yeah, the final stat lines are going to look amazing for Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, but come on. We know that was a lot of stat padding late. We know that you could take off at least 50, 60 yards from each of their stat lines of the actual game that mattered. It mattered to you if you're a fantasy owner, but aside from that, in terms of the actual game result, a lot of AJ Brown and Devontae Smith's stat lines didn't really matter to the game.
The thing that I think is more interesting beyond, like, because Mooney Ward had a couple great plays for the 49ers in that game, and Ambry Thomas stuck to his man. And sometimes when you don't hear a person's name for a while, that's sometimes good because they're not going that direction in the passing game. And they stuck him on a lot of Devonta Smith, and that was an interesting choice defensively by Steve Wilkes. But the thing that I think was more interesting and will be like indicative of them going forward is that the most snaps on the team for the 49ers was a tie at 72 between Deebo Lenoir and Charvarius Ward. Ambry Thomas was on the field for 69 out of 72 snaps. Like, the 49ers are thin in that cornerback room. And it sucks again that they lost Hufanga for the season and Jair Brown's had to step up as well. But they are thin in that cornerback room, and they're putting a lot of that burden on Charvarius Ward, which again isn't a huge problem. It's just more of a note that will be interesting going forward. They're going to need Ambry Thomas to be not at top of the league, like one of the top 10, but they're going to need him to play like a starting NFL corner pretty consistently for the rest of the season, and that's not the best bet in the world. Now, granted, given everything else they have on defense with Kinlaw and Hargrave playing excellent on the interior, Young has been a phenomenal pickup, like most of us knew it was going to be. Their second unit of pass rush is better than a lot of teams' first unit of pass rush. So, like, saying that their second corner needs to continue playing like a starting NFL corner is a small thing to hold against them. But it will matter if they get into 1-score games at the end of the game, because we know Kyle Shanahan is not great at getting leads when it's a close game and holding on to them, especially if they are going to play a team that can win the time of possession battle, because that's ultimately the thing that works great for the Niners, is that they win time of possession a lot. I mean, if you take away from the second quarter until garbage time at the end of that game, which was like a 29-minute stretch in the middle of the game, I think the Niners, they were plus 12 in time of possession in the 39 minutes between the start of the second quarter and like 5 minutes left in the fourth when garbage time kicked in. They were a plus 12 in those 39 minutes in time of possession, which is a huge deal. And it keeps your defense off the field and gives Deebo Lenoir and Charvarius Ward and Ambry Thomas time to rest and recover and give their best when they are on the field.
I mean, hey, if anything does happen in the corner room, Niners fans, be assured we'll see Deontay Johnson get re-signed and maybe even Josh Norman come back. So we have enforcements. We have enforcements on the way,
Richard
guys.
Sherman off the couch, off the desk, off the couch. Richard Sherman coming back.
I take Uncle Sherm, right? You know, I still think that we should have gave him a Super Bowl trophy in 2019. Oh, well. But then again, he also did get cooked by Sammy Watkins, so that was partially why they didn't end up winning that Super Bowl. It was just an all-around impressive performance, offensively, defensively. Special teams didn't blow it. Coaching-wise, everyone seemed to be all together. And, you know, hey, again, another shout out to Steve Wilkes. Moving from the booth down to the field, that seems to have been the magic wand that this defense needed, because they've been shut down every step of the way since. So, hey, I credit, again, the Niners top to bottom for being able to recognize their weaknesses, amplify their strengths, and just keep double downing on beating some of the best teams in the league. Let us know what you thought about the Niners-Eagles game in the comment section. Leave a like in the video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on all our social medias from Juju and Kyle. Stay safe, happy, and healthy. We'll see you next time.